Imagine a vibrant discussion between people that includes both openness and critical thought in the pursuit of truth. The Purchasing Truth podcast is an experience, a journey, an exploration of the impact that negative messages in politics and the media have on our families, community, society, and nation. Join your hosts, Bill Stierle and Tom Hazard, to discover new concepts and language strategies that will reveal effective ways of establishing truth. This podcast series will tackle current events, leadership challenges, healthcare confusion, integrity in business, and many other areas that affect us all. Gain clarity and understanding of the various truth perspectives. Welcome to Purchasing Truth.
Everyone, welcome back to Purchasing Truth. I'm Tom Hazard, your host, Bill Stierle. And, Bill, there is obviously an awful lot going on in the world, especially with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And from a communications perspective, it's very interesting to see the narrative that is being fed to the Russian people on Russian state TV as different from what the rest of the world is seeing. And it's obviously, there's a very, very stark difference between the two. And, Russian state TV has been ordered. They can't call it a war. Journalists can't, they're limited in how they can refer to it. They have to call it this special military action unless the state approves of some other narrative. So, very, very big difference between most of the rest of the world, certainly the United States, with the freedom of press. And there was this interesting moment, Bill, that we saw in just the last 24 hours, a Russian state TV live broadcast, and a worker at that station standing up and holding a sign in protest, saying, "Don't stop the war, don't believe the propaganda, the state is lying." I'm paraphrasing, but basically that's what was said. And of course, that woman's been arrested, but she posted a video about it before doing this protest. So this was very planned. And we have a video to share with our audience on the blog post at purchasingtruth.com about that. But it's an interesting departure point to talk about communication in this context.
I agree. Tom, it's a great example about, how do we create an impact in communication? Here's a protester that brings a sign up and is able to get her message out to people that are not getting one side of a message. Whereas in America, we get two sides of a message or a counter side to the message. And then what winds up happening is it's the buyer beware. It's okay for half-truths, lies, partial truths, perspective truths to be sold, just so the buyer needs to be aware that that's really kind of what it is. Whereas in a controlled media setting, there's one form of truth, and you're not allowing the listener's ears to move too far away from the truth that you're putting in front of them. You're keeping the fence around, the cattle or the sheep or the goats or whatever animal you want to put in there. And then all you've got to do is corral those people's ears by whatever barking dog you want to put in there. Different kinds of dogs, different kinds of scare tactics, prods, electric shocks, or 3 to 15-year prison sentences for speaking up. Those are all containment items. Getting canceled is a containing things. You better not say something a little bit controversial because it's going to affect your income. Just ask Colin Kaepernick about this one. If you say something, you're trying to figure out what's the best way to use my ability to speak up as an American, and and be an advocate for this thing regarding police violence. And that's the challenge we have in an open society versus Russia is in a closed society. It's both of them are controlling the limbic brain differently. And it's a weird way to say it. It's like we have this elephant at the back of our brain, and we have a little man at the top that's a writer, and the messages are coming in. The writer gets confused, and the elephant sits down into what they already believe. Or the writer gets scared, or the elephant gets scared about whatever the latest barking dog is. And the elephants cannot herd together to do a stampede because you're picking different, energies off one at a time. And this is a little bit of what we have as a problem is communication is that it's whatever the latest barking dog is, and how long is that barking dog going to last? So really, really very, very tough. Yeah.
It is very troubling. So in Russia, it's reported that, the internet has been clamped down, and that
Right.
Obviously there's been this order released to all the news outlets about how they can and cannot talk about what's happening in Ukraine. There's a lot of the social media platforms like Instagram's been shut down in Russia. And, so the lines of communication have been really, shut off, most of the normal ones. And what we're hearing is that aside from somebody who has access, an employee of Russian state TV, getting up and doing something in a live broadcast that
Right.
no one can stop her from doing for a moment, for 10 or 15 seconds before somebody drags her off the set.
Right.
The only other way that we've been hearing, or what's been reported as messages are getting through, is through direct text messages from people outside Russia to people inside Russia, letting them know what's really happening out here. But that's not a very widely broadcast means of communication.
It's very, 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 very difficult to get that to spread out. It's like, how big is your text list? 100, 200, 1,000, 3,000 people receive your text. I have one wonderful marketer that, she keeps texting me about her latest program that she does. And I know that I'm one of 10,000 people at least, because that's the focus that she got herself into early on. So with all that said, the activation of bias, the activation of what we see what I already believe to be true. I'm only seeing what I already believe to be true. So over the last 20 years, Putin has been doing a great job of, need I say, brilliant job, keeping his messaging. Europe wants this. The enemies are on the West. Here's a story that proves that point of view. Here's another story that proves the point of view. Here's another story that proves the point of view. So in bias, there's not much nuance. There's like, I have a clear enemy over there, and I have a clear hero on my side, and I'm in the right because, the West is going to attack us. Meanwhile, the West is doing its best to live by treaties. And I'm very clear of when America has went across those lines too, and has made their set of mistakes and their set of things, and has paid different kinds of consequences that Russia's style, the consequences that he's paying for, and that again is a part of the bias and the experience that I have, that you have, that the United States have about right, wrong, good, bad. We struggle with our own set of biases. So what's the casualty here? What's the casualty? The casualty is things like open-mindedness, flexibility, creativity, innovation, change. Those are all the casualties of a Putin-style, narrative. And whereas Trump is better than Putin at this because he's using messaging and those kinds of barking dogs to control his thinkers into believing things that aren't really fully true. And that by doing that and by staying at that message that he perceives as a winning formula for him or for his current Republican Party, is they have to be fed that bias. They've been, regrettably, over the last 30 years, they've been funneling themselves for their objectives. The only problem is their objectives is against some very primary values called cooperation and collaboration and the ability to actually make a good business deal and both sides win. They are not in that space. So yeah, anyway, so that's one way to think about it, is that Trump is on one side of this narrative and Putin is on the other side, and they're both trying to win the messaging war.
Well, and that's a really interesting thought, Bill. And I would say that, Trump at one point called Putin a genius, and right, of course got a lot of attention for that. And I would argue that Trump is much more brilliant and much more skilled at marketing and communication and getting his message out and getting his sheep, if you will, to follow him than Putin is. Because, Putin has certain controls and mechanisms that Trump doesn't have in America. Putin has the ability to pull these levers of communication and require state media to report the story he wants them to express the bias, and to certainly prevent any counter messages from being communicated officially.
Officially, officially, he's able to kind of, the control person, like you're saying, has to work within certain limitations, and the freedom person, like Trump has to work within situations and continue to, as Trump does, continue to step across the line to see how far it can get a hold of. And Putin is doing the same thing. He's stepping across the line to see how far he can go. He's 20 miles from the Polish border. That's all he needed to do is get, one of his plane sailors says, listen, I was bombing this thing and your guys came across to get me, not my guys did this. Because whatever happens on the border with Poland, whatever happens is that incursion. Now, what are you going to do? Now what? And Bill Maher said that one time, make me. I'm saying I'm a liar now. Make me have integrity, make me have ethics, make me have morals, make me have values. Nope. No, I'm going to do whatever I want. I'm going to see it, because there's the guardrails, on good behavior, and the adult behavior at those levels are not as strong as they used to be, 30 years ago.
Yeah, no. Putin has very few guardrails that are going to impact him. I mean, certainly the world community is sanctioning him and speaking out against him, but if he keeps all that noise outside of his borders, at least to a great extent, I mean, if at least 5 million people or more don't get out and protest in the streets against Putin in Moscow, or at least in multiple cities around the country, Putin is not going to care or be impacted by the noise outside his borders. That's one of the big differences. And again, to me, that's what says that Donald Trump is a much more effective and brilliant marketer than Vladimir Putin, because he's able to get, he was able to get 74 million people to vote for him And he doesn't have any of those powers to limit any opposition speech in the United States, right?
Right. Exactly. There's the brand damage that happens with Democrats that they've been launching for 20 years. Brand damage. They're communists, they're socialists, there's whatever messaging, a negative bias messaging on Democrats that you want to put on there. And the Democrats, not all of them, get stuck here is that they're fighting the brand message instead of establishing their own message of this is the kind of person I am. Yes, there's a bunch of other people that are Democrats that might be voting for me that might have other beliefs about this. But as my style of democracy, or as a Democrat, this is what I'm fighting for. I'm fighting for these kinds of things, and not to ignore the conservative narrative, but to include the conservative narrative. It's like, what, is this thing going to have values to it? I mean, the word regulation should be something that the Republicans should own. And what I mean by that is that it's all about making sure that the money is spent well, that people are protected from a good amount of protection that goes with your workers and your business and the environment. I mean, that's all conservative values. What is that doing on the Democrat side? And then the Republicans go like, it's business. We want to, there's too much regulations. There's too much taxes. And it's like, yeah, that's not what's going on here. It's protection and conservative values to protect people. I'm interested in working on the people. And it's like, well, I guess you can just honor that one business person that does that. Or you can honor the people that you're, that are voting on you to serve them. So it's very, very tough to see that Trump does have and more skill and is better than Putin at marketing messages that stick. That these marketing messages stick because he tests them more often. That's what the rally's for, to test marketing messages. His rambling is all about testing. To see where he can get the latest chatter. I was reading an article, he's rambling and he said this thing. I'm going like, he's not rambling, he's testing. It's like, what? Yeah, he's testing. He's finding out which phrase and waiting for his marketing brain to come up. And that's why he called Putin. He said, it's brilliant. What he's done is brilliant. What he's done, not Putin, is brilliant. What Putin did was brilliant. Create a limited message that said, we are saving these Russians that are under attack on the, west side of on the east side of the country, because the Ukrainians are bad to these people. They're Russian speakers. And this is all about a limited and Putin's trying to hold that message in because he doesn't want the war to go up and the word war to go on. No, special military, envoy. It's like, well,
isn't it interesting though that Putin knows that if he called it a war, if he were just unapologetically brutal and saying, we are Russia, Ukraine should be a part of Russia, we're going in to take it back, his own people would not be happy with that. They would potentially rise up against him. So there may be some guardrails somewhere out there among the people. And that's why he's using the powers that he has to control the narrative, to make sure that does not come back and bite him in the ass. Right. That's
right. That's right.
So what's interesting, Bill, is, there are many in our own government in the United States that have criticized President Trump for being too cozy with Putin, for giving him too much praise, for, calling him a genius, for sort of siding with him against our own intelligence agencies and all this. So that happened through his administration. And there are, even many Republicans, I would say more traditional Republicans, who sometimes Trump might call rhinos, are just baffled at how Trump is, portraying that he's cozying up to Putin, that he's praising him and all this stuff. So it occurred to me, wouldn't it be quite interesting to see a savvy US journalist who wants to interview Trump to pitch Trump on the idea of talking to him about, Putin and his, and bringing out his own message about Putin and what he thinks about him. And you could feed into Trump's need for acknowledgement, his need for self-worth and all this, asking him questions, but getting him to, take him down the road of, you're a much more brilliant marketer than Vladimir Putin, and here's why,
right.
And have that be completely truthful. But
it's truthful.
You would feed into Trump's ego, and he'd be loving you, and he'd be wanting to talk more about it.
Yeah.
And you could lead him down a path pretty easily into really being transparent about how he uses communication to manipulate the sheep and get them to follow him and to corral them, as you were sort of talking about earlier.
Right.
And get him to sort of walk out a plank of admitting what he does.
Yes. It might sound like this from a communication, because our show's got to land in some kind of solution about how to get out of this, right? So the way to take care of a carnival barker, somebody that is selling and marketing and promoting all the time, is to repeat back what the carnival barker is saying and acknowledge what the carnival barker is saying is true. So it would sound like, Trump, it's amazing how skillful you are at marketing messages and how much you're better than Putin, because you're doing it in a free society where he's got to do it. His only strategy is doing it in controlled society where he has to keep his messages. I really admire that about you. And it is something that I see that you're really skilled about. And then Trump is going to speak. He goes, yeah. That's one of the things that really happens, is that you've got to be able to connect to the people. And then he's going to ramble and look for a sentence that's going to meet his need for respect and recognition. That's what he does. And to puff himself up as the decision maker. And then you go back and feed him another spoon of food. Gosh, I'd really respect what you have, the way you've ran your campaign, and that all of these people, these millions of people that voted for you, isn't that magical what you've done? Because you are such a great messenger. Yes, my message connects. It resonates with people. It really gets people. And this is all the people believe that. Look at that. There's so many people there. Biden now didn't have hardly any people at his rallies. It's because he didn't need to have people in his rallies. Anyways, so let's stay after solution. Solution then is that, could you share with us some of the ways that you're a better messenger than Putin? Oh, well, the thing I do is the thing I look at, and people say that about me. People really admire that about me. People really recognize about me. And now all of a sudden he's out on the plank of self-recognition and acknowledgement ahead of truth, self-identity ahead of truth. So now all of a sudden he is literally the front man to his own circus. And that's the thing that people got to get, is he's running a circus. Just look at all the people he had in his cabinet. There was a circus over there. Look at all these great, crazy people. That's the circus. I mean, it's all the misfits.
Well, you could get Trump to peel back his own curtain behind what he really does. I mean, it would be a way to reveal the truth of how Trump operates and how he communicates, and might get a lot of people to open their eyes to realize they've been the rats being let out of the town by the Pied Piper.
Right. It's very, very challenging because it's very hard for the follower to be weaned off of that level of dopamine and adrenaline and cortisol and serotonin and the up and down that he keeps them on. Because there's the up of enraged and then the bitterness and the exasperation about the other side. And then I feel better because at least this guy speaks a message that's familiar to my beliefs, my biases, and my fallacies about what he's going to do for me. I mean, that's regrettably where it sits. And it's really, really hard to see where the Republican Party is going to go because they don't have another messenger that's strong. Nikki Haley, she's not strong, and Ted Cruz, he's not strong. He's a prosecutor. I mean, he's every time I listen to him do a speech, I'm going like, oh, he's an attorney and he's just prosecuting and trying to make and score points to get the other person to say something. And that person's on the stand and he's just using his attorney skills and he's just beating up the witness. That's what he's doing. He's been beating up the witness. And who's the jury? The voters. That's who the voters, and who you're interested in, getting the voters to vote for you by beating up the witness. And that's why Trump can get elected ahead of Cruz, because Trump's the marketer guy. He's not the attorney guy. So it's really weird, but it's like they're politicians, but they're not politicians. Well, they're politicians, but they're not statesmen, to be really on. The statesman is somebody that you say what you need to do to get elected and then serve the people. That's a statesman. A politician is say what you need to do and then say more in order to move up the change, even over you're stepping over and running over your constituents. Who are those people? I just need to get them to vote for me next time around so I don't get voted out.
Right. That's a politician. I agree. That's
the politician through and through, right? So it'll be interesting. I think that, as the war goes on and as we, kind of figure out how to stick the landing here is that we've got to get our messagings to break the spell, to break the curse of this messaging. And it's one of the things that we're finding as a society hard to do. We're really doing that, and we can talk more about that as the war goes on, because there's plenty of messaging that's taking place.
It's going to be very interesting, and there's some interesting messaging going on by Vladimir Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, too. That's another thing that might be interesting to talk about in the future, because he's being hailed as quite a great example of a leader and what leadership looks like. And it's all because of his communication in the midst of this war.
That's right. That's right. And he's been measured. He's been adult-like, but adult-like is, you don't like your parents when they give you honest messages. Hey, you got to pay for your own bills. Hey, you got to grow up. Hey, you got to do the dishes. You don't want to listen to the parent, but he's kind of the parent in this one. So,
he may be. Okay, yeah. Bill. Well, thanks so much. I appreciate the discussion today. Very thought-provoking.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Thank you for listening to this Purchasing Truth podcast. We trust that you have enjoyed this engaging and thought-provoking conversation. Our hope is that you've received value, found clarity, and broadened your truth perspective in this episode. If you did, leave us a review or visit our website, purchasingtruth.com. Join us again for another informative and content-rich discussion here at the Purchasing Truth podcast. Don't just accept whatever information comes your way. Join the discussion. Discover your own voice. Purchase your own truth.